Greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call institutional gaslighting. And I'm going to start with a story of Raymond Bernard. Some of you may have heard him being referred to as Moses in the media. Well, a fortnight ago, his was the final funeral. Now, we've read and seen footage a lot about the bravery of the firefighters, but we haven't heard so much about the bravery of some of the survivors and some of the victims. And Moses, or Raymond, was one such hero. So let me give you a bit of backstory on Raymond. Raymond was found hosting 7 people on that fateful night. 7 people who knew that they couldn't go downstairs because the fire was too strong, and decided that the only way to safety was to go upstairs. Now, Raymond's is testimony to many of the brave acts that were taken by that night, not by the authorities, not by the institutions themselves, but by the survivors, by the victims, by the local community. And I want to unpick that a little bit later. Well, let me start with where we're forced to start, and that's the inquiry. The phase of the inquiry that we last reported on was that of the London Fire Brigade. And the big news, the interview that really caused the most stir, was that of the chief, Danny Cotton. Now, when I say caused a big stir, I don't mean in a positive sense. I mean, first of all, she made it clear that she doesn't remember everything. There are gaps in her memory. I think those are the words that she used. But I think the thing that caused the most upset and the most offence was her insistence that she wouldn't have changed a single thing on that night. She would have made exactly the same decisions. And whilst I get loyalty is a good thing, loyalty to her team, having their back, loyalty in the face of errors and stupidity is not a good thing. You see, Danny Cotton's testimony that there was no way to anticipate a cladding fire like Grenfell is really a lie. I mean, we now know that 9 months earlier, that London Fire Brigade engineers had put together a presentation actually dealing precisely with the risk of cladding fires. And she's claiming that she and her team never saw it. And I find that really hard to believe. I mean, on the night, a firefighter by the name of Norman Harrison actually testified that he told his chiefs, he told those in charge, look, we've got to cancel the stay put policy, it's putting people's lives at risk. But he was ignored. Barbara Lane, the fire expert, she gave testimony at the inquiry, and she's making it clear that actually, if that policy had been kind of like cancelled, had been stopped, many lives would have been saved. So when Danny Cotton is insistent that A, she doesn't remember everything that happened that night, and B, she wouldn't have changed a single thing if it were to occur again, using some really facetious analogy about a space shuttle landing on the Shard. She insults us all. Witness after witness has given evidence that if the stay put policy had been scrapped, if people had been told to evacuate the building, more lives could have been saved. In fact, one witness has actually made it clear that when they were coming down, firefighters told them to go back up. Now, thankfully, they ignored that advice and they're alive today to tell the tale. But how many others aren't? Who were those firefighters who made those statements? I mean, some of these things we'll never know. And I'll be clear, I'm not blaming individual firefighters for going into a burning building to save lives. But if the head of the London Fire Brigade, Danny Cotton, can say that she would have changed nothing, that essentially there's no lessons to learn, then what is the point of this inquiry? Anyway, it's really important that we're getting to hear testimony from the survivors. We're hearing some horrific tales. We're hearing about a father who almost gave up on his family and decided, no, his 6-year-old deserves to live. And actually they escaped. We're hearing about a young man who had to leave his disabled father, couldn't get him down, and he died, he perished. We're hearing about, what's this bizarre case? A woman, I think a grandmother with 3 children, she was waiting for the fire brigade to come, 45 minutes, and when they came, they started swearing at her because her mobility unit, her wheelchair, were outside the front door because they couldn't fit into her apartment. Basically, reasonable adjustments hadn't been made to her abode. And so they were claiming that she risked the lives of her children by violating health and safety protocols. And this is while the fire is taking place. I don't know if that's quite appropriate action, the right appropriate call to make at such a stressful, intense time. We also found out from the other hero, Ed DeFaran, that his request to actually get the minutes or copies of the minutes from when the decision was made to switch from zinc cladding, which would have protected the residents, to this combustible stuff, he was denied this information simply because the authorities felt that it would actually expose the commercial operations of the contractors. Again, putting profit before people, because he's now living with the angst that if he had known about this decision, that he could have at least campaigned to get the cladding removed before the fire took place. So this is why evidence from survivors, from the residents, is just as crucial as that from the authority, from the London Fire Brigade. And even though they are traumatised, and even though firefighters are traumatised, we have to hear from both sides. Anyway, so that's the inquiry. Now, what's going on with the investigation? Well, there's some complex news story about the police having charged 10 people for fraud, but the people who are charged for fraud have actually not done any work on Grenfell. Anyway, an investigation that is of great interest and of great importance is that by Professor Anna Steck. Now, she's uncovered evidence of hydrogen cyanide in the area and great levels of what they call it, carcinogenic toxins. And these are basically cancer-inducing properties, things that can have long-term effects on the lives of everybody who inhaled the smoke at the time. Now, you may remember last year when people were raising the issue of toxic elements inside the environment, and Public Health England conducted a little survey and said, look, nothing to see, everything's okay, go back to your little lives, we've done our tests, no air pollution. But now even the NHS is getting on the game, and I think they're spending something like £50 million to actually look at the long-term health impact on people who live in that area. And this is really interesting because I don't know if you realise, but there's actually a school at the base of Grenfell, and the children have moved back into the school. And one of our team was making this really great point. If that was a private school, do you think they would have moved the children back into that school? Because I don't think they would have. I think they would have protected the health of those children. They would have made sure that there wasn't any problems. In my opinion, we've got to stop taking the advice and the opinions that's given to us by the authorities as if it's gospel, as if it's truthful. They've got an agenda, and it's clearly not the same as most of us. Well, there is some good news. The government has announced that it's going to ban flammable cladding. Now, whilst this sounds fantastic, we've got to place this in context. There are some 468 buildings that are affected by flammable cladding. And out of that 468, only 32 of them will get the benefits of this banning, because the government's allocating, I think it's 400 million to councils. Everybody else is going to have to foot the bill themselves. And even the London Fire Brigade themselves, well, not the London Fire Brigade, but the Fire Brigade Union, are saying that this is a political stunt, that they're not going far enough. The measures should apply to all buildings, not just those that are over 18 metres high. Westminster Council, let's look at over there. They're charging leaseholders for actually fitting fire sprinklers in their building. So we've got to keep an eye on all these stories because they're all related. There was another piece of good news, and this is to addressing the plight of young people in the area. There's a fund that's been made, I think it's 1.2 million, for the young people themselves to decide what kind of services they'd like to see, for them to take a key role in the decision-making process, and I really am up for that. So it's not all doom and gloom. Out of the 204 families that are affected, or households that are affected, 74 are now left in emergency and temporary accommodation. So progress is really starting to take place. Even though we're hearing announcements that the borough has some 600 odds empty properties that people could live in. I think they're making some moves to actually get the laws changed so they can actually seize properties. When you consider that some £30 million has been spent on hotel fees, you can see it's a very, very political issue. In fact, it's so political that some of the council workers have been bullying residents, while others have admittedly been kind and caring. It's the bullying ones that we're concerned with, trying to force residents to move. That is not the approach to alleviate stress and help people move on. So what's happened in the way of support? Well, Megan, in her first role project, has announced a cookbook with the women of Grenfell, and this is going to help raise money for other people in similar circumstances. I think Serena has sent her endorsements. We also had to big up the Liverpool fans who kept the profile of Grenfell alive when, during a match with Chelsea, they put up a massive banner, Justice for Grenfell. Thank you. But I want to close with a scary thought about institutional gaslighting. Yesterday I was at an event where Imran Khan was speaking about the ability of inquiries to actually secure justice.
Of the 68 public inquiries that have taken place since 1968, only 6 have been followed up by a select committee to see what government did as a result of that inquiry. That report, which came up with that particular figure, also found that inquiries take too long to publish findings. 1 in 7 inquiries takes 5 years or longer to release their final report.
So I'm going to close with that thought and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. I'm drenched. Asher.